What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So over the last several days, the Steam Deck has been making headline after headline after headline with all of the different games and programs it can run, which does include emulators of previous systems as well as a certain current system that is kind of putting Nintendo in a very strange situation. We're going to go over that one here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a big sale that's hit the PlayStation Store, and we're also going to be taking a look back at the last 5 years as the Switch is now half a decade old. Guys, if you enjoyed these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the SpawnWave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all of the uploads here on the channel. And we're gonna start today with an update to a story yesterday around that Steam Deck drift, where people on the Reddit actually posted up videos of their right stick kind of drifting around when they had it set up, where they could see the different values for the X and Y when it came to the joystick and where it was positioned. Looked like it was drifting a bit on that right stick. Well, Valve actually did something we typically don't expect from a large company like this. They fixed it pretty quickly. We can see this over on Twitter. This is from Lawrence Yang saying, "Hi all, a quick note about Steam Deck thumbsticks. The team has looked into the reported issues, and it turns out it was a dead zone regression from a recent firmware update. We just shipped a fix to address the bug, so make sure you're up to date." Now, the funny thing about this is around 7 or so that night, the night previous, I'd actually uploaded Newswave and it was set and ready to go, and then, like I said, an hour or two later, Valve decided they had to get out in front of that story for Newswave. That's the only thing I could think of that happened here. But it's good to see that Valve is taking the feedback seriously and they're acting very quickly. I mean, they understand, and they've admitted this, that the Steam Deck is still a work in progress despite them actually shipping it out now. But hey, if you have any issues, yeah, go and submit a support ticket, because it looks like they're listening and ready to get things fixed. Also, it looks like we have a big next gen, or I guess current gen update now heading to several Resident Evil games. We can see this posted up over on Twitter from Resident Evil, saying Resident Evil 2, 3, and 7 are coming to PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S with visual enhancements later this year. Those who currently own these games on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One will be eligible for a digital upgrade at no additional cost. Obviously, it looks like they're going to be releasing just PS5, Xbox Series X, and S boxed copies for these different games, which, I mean, it makes sense for Capcom. These are very good games, and they figure, hey, we can sell them all over again, but you'll at least be eligible for a free upgrade on the digital side of things there. And I'm curious what they're gonna do with this. I mean, the obvious thing is they'll make the game look better. It'll probably just be straight true 4K, no issues there, no upscaling, I assume. And maybe they'll go for a higher frame rate. Even could they push for like 120 hertz, maybe ray tracing added in? So pretty cool that they're at least going back and doing that. And if you have not played these different games, they're phenomenal games, and I recommend certainly going back and playing Resident Evil 2 Remake to see what you think, because out of the three, that one's currently my favorite. Oh, and tomorrow we do have a couple of games coming out, one being Gran Turismo 7, which we'll be taking a look at review scores here in a little bit, but we also have Triangle Strategy, which is a game that I am very excited to get to, because it certainly reminds me very much of like Final Fantasy Tactics from back in the day, and I really like the HD 2D art style that Square is currently running with for several titles. Well, we did get our first review score for Triangle Strategy. I'm sure more will be coming out today, because, I mean, the game's out tomorrow, so not much longer for an embargo to lift, really. But we can see this post up on Nintendo Everything with a couple of different review scores, even for Sol Cresta and Sifu, which definitely check out Sifu, because I keep seeing it scoring pretty well at a lot of places, and I really enjoyed that game. But we can see Triangle Strategy 8999, so giving it a score of 35, putting it right in line with the 35 that Sonic Forces got, of course, there. But I mean, from what we're seeing and what they were describing in Famitsu, it's looking like it's going to be that traditional strategy-based RPG that we're all expecting from Square, of course, reflecting what we used to have back in the day with Final Fantasy Tactics. So I'm on board. I mean, you can download a demo right now, play the first 3 chapters, and then transfer your save data over. So at this point, you'll know if you like the game or not. Go ahead and check that out. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the Steam Deck, which is a system that I am really excited to get someday. Whenever that order is filled and it's shipped out, I'll be talking about it, and we'll be getting into this whole thing with a video and tearing it down, but also checking out some of the different games you can play on it. Now, I know there's a lot of talk around current games like Elden Ring or Control or others, but I was very curious about the possibilities around this device and emulation, because it's a powerful device, especially at its price point right now, starting at $400 compared to other kind of small PC handhelds. That's like half the price of some of the much more capable ones. And it looks like many people are at least trying out different emulators. Like Jeff Grubb, for example, posted an entire video on his channel checking out things like the GameCube, which that's correct. You should be checking that system out because it looks like it runs really well through Dolphin. We had seen kind of Dolphin, the developers, post up that they had a Steam Deck, so it sort of looks like they're going to do development specifically for the Steam Deck, which is the most exciting part around some of these different emulators and the teams behind them, as they have a base system to develop around and those certain specifications. Another really good channel that you want to check out, though, is The Fox. He's been doing a lot of coverage for the Steam Deck, as well as several other like portable handheld emulation and PC devices, like even the GPD Win. But he showed off Xbox emulation, and it's pretty good, like surprisingly good. I know the Xbox is technically right there next to the GameCube or the PS2, but I don't know, something about seeing Jet Set Radio Future there in the palm of your hands is really cool. However, those are, of course, legacy systems, one that Microsoft, Nintendo won't care as much about. It would really become a problem for some of these companies if it started emulating, I don't know, the Switch, which is something that was talked about leading up to it, like, oh, what if this thing could actually run the Switch games well enough? Well, it looks like it actually might be able to, as people are starting to post videos, whether it's on Reddit or on YouTube, of it just running games at full speed. I've seen videos of things like Mario Odyssey running at 60 frames per second. Metroid Dread even was shown off. And the biggest thing around Yuzu, which is the emulator that's really going around right now with the Steam Deck, is it's a legal program. Like, Nintendo really can't do much about Yuzu. It's open source. They're not using any code that Nintendo has copyright claims to. They're just developing it themselves. And the Steam Deck seems to be a big system that they're now looking at, as Vulkan's even been enabled now for Yuzu with the Steam Deck, which means Nintendo's in a kind of an odd situation, aren't they? Now there's a system that, while if you, of course, emulated the Switch on, I don't know, like a PC, and yeah, you got good performance, but it didn't necessarily have like the concept of the Switch. And there are a lot of handheld devices that weren't exactly running Switch games well, if at all, like these mini PC handhelds. But the Steam Deck comes along, and so far, just out of the gate, it's doing pretty well. And these teams seem very interested in the Steam Deck to the point where they know what's in it and they can develop specifically for it. And that seems to be the plan for many of these emulation teams currently, which tells me, yeah, Nintendo's gonna be paying attention to the Steam Deck in that regard. Now, I have noticed, as many people are starting to talk about this, is that Nintendo is seemingly pulling down videos of the Steam Deck playing these games. Now, they haven't done this for all of them, and I did check around specifically with, I know MVG had issues with Nintendo when it came to the Switch, for example, where you had videos of like soft modding and homebrew on the system. And from what I can gather, it has to do with first-party games or just showing how to do it. So I know there was a video going around from the Fox who had it pulled down. Well, it looked like it may have been more of a tutorial video, and Nintendo's not going to play around with that because they're like, well, now you're just showing people how to like put games that they may not own on that device and play them rather than buy a Switch. And if there's two things we don't have to question, it's Nintendo's pettiness and Nintendo in the courtroom. They don't really mess around with either of those. They'll go massively overboard. So them striking down certain videos showcasing what the Steam Deck can do with first-party games for the Switch isn't too surprising. If anything, my advice would be, if you want to show it off, pick out some third-party games or something that Nintendo doesn't have, like claims around characters and imagery being used in that game, because otherwise they wouldn't really have much of a case at all, and they would probably just leave it alone. But let me know what you guys think about the Steam Deck and some of the capabilities for it when it comes to emulation. I already have a Switch, so I don't really care much about like it emulating Switch games, but when I see Jeff Grubb playing PS3 games portably on this system, I'm like, wow, I can play Metal Gear Solid 4 on the go with the Steam Deck. Next up, let's talk about Gran Turismo 7. It's out tomorrow. I've been looking forward to this game for quite a while, even when they announced that, oh wait, it's also cross-gen. I was like, look, it's still a new numbered Gran Turismo, something we have not had since the PlayStation 3. Remember, we've been kind of hanging out with Gran Turismo Sport for, what feels like forever now, so it's exciting stuff to see Polyphony get back to it with Gran Turismo 7, and we could see the Metacritic score currently sitting at an 88, which that's very good, I would say. That's on 85 critic reviews. If we look at the current split, 81 positive and 4 mixed. Some of the big positives that I've seen with these different reviews obviously comes down to the visuals, which, I mean, Gran Turismo, just through the generations, has always been an impressive looking game, and looks like that's still the case here, as we're expecting with Gran Turismo 7. There's also the fact of the staggering number of tracks, the like super deep customization with all the different cars, and an interesting focus on the history of car manufacturers and builds and everything there, to the point where you'll just be getting straight up like lectures while you're unlocking things in the game. Of course, you can skip all of that if you don't really care and just get back to the racing itself. Also, people point out that like the haptic feedback and the triggers themselves, the adaptive triggers, play a pretty big role when it comes to racing over puddles or debris or anything there, where you'll kind of feel it, not like overwhelmingly so, more like a subtle kind of sense that, oh yeah, this road is kind of rough compared to a smoother asphalt surface. But one of the mixed reviews that I noticed was VGC, and they did mention clunky menus, a ton of dialogue, and tons of visits to things like the cafe. And, you know, I thought about it a bit, and I'm like, yeah, there are a lot of menus typically in some of these Gran Turismo games, so if you're not necessarily aware of that going into it, you might get kind of bored and just start to kind of press accept over and over and over again until you finally get back to the racing. But as someone who typically prefers Gran Turismo with simulation track racing, I'm just excited to get into Gran Turismo 7. The arcade racing, typically I stick to Need for Speed or Forza Horizon, but whenever a Gran Turismo comes out, it's, for me anyway, a big event, and I'm looking forward to jumping into it. And I kind of hope this will also play into PlayStation VR 2 down the road as a big title for that, because I thought at least them venturing into it with GT Sport was a good idea to set them up for the future, and this looks like a title that would really play into that. We'll see more about that, I'm sure, towards the end of this year, maybe if a PlayStation event's coming up anytime soon then, but as for now, looking forward to tomorrow to pick up Gran Turismo 7. Next up, let's talk about a big sale that is now live on the PlayStation Store. This is the PlayStation Essentials sale, and it'll be running until March 16th. We're just gonna kind of go through some of the pages here, and I'll point a few of the games out to you, which we can see. Starting at the top with Spider-Man, that's the Game of the Year edition at $20. It's the PS4 version, so you might want to look more towards, I would say, like the remaster. But then there's Last of Us Part 2 at $20. Which is pretty good there. Dying Light Platinum Edition at $15. I played through Dying Light 2, and you know, I gotta agree with most of the people who are saying this, that I kind of like the first Dying Light more, so still an easy recommendation there at $15. You have Assassin's Creed, the Ezio Collection there at $12. We just talked about Resident Evil 3 getting that big upgrade later on this year. Here it is for $16, so you pick this version up and you'll get that upgrade for free on the PlayStation 5. The Jak and Daxter bundle is $20. We have Control Ultimate Edition at $14. Saints Row the Third Remastered at $10. We have Tetris Effect Connected at $20, which if you have a really nice OLED display, maybe a good sound system, you certainly want to pick up Tetris Effect and just kind of sit back and check it out, because there's some really impressive visuals. Also, to go along with Resident Evil 3, we do have Resident Evil 2 Deluxe Edition at $20. Again, you can take advantage of that free upgrade later on this year. We have the Wipeout Omega Collection there at $8. I also noticed that Lost in Random, which is a game that I keep looking at, it's $15 now. It might finally be time, I would say, to pick that one up and check it out. Or if you're on a big JRPG kick, there's Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition at $10, or Ni no Kuni at $10. I like pointing that one out a lot because that is a really good JRPG to get into. Otherwise, though, there are a ton of different games on sale here. That was about half the pages, so make sure you check them out. And as always, leave some recommendations down in the comments if there's any good deals that you notice. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the Nintendo Switch and how it's now 5 years old. Released March 3rd, 2017. Here we are in 2022, and who would have thought the Switch would have already crossed 100 million units, looking to actually pass the PS2, maybe? Anything's possible at this point with how fast it's selling, and still the lineup that Nintendo is setting up over the next 12 to 18 months. But I mean, think back to when we first saw the Switch with that reveal trailer where the person's in their apartment, they take it out to the park to be playing The Legend of Zelda. Of course, they're on the plane checking out Skyrim, and even the build-up where we had looks at it through things like the Jimmy Fallon show, where Reggie went there with a Switch, originally going there with Mario Run, but oh no, they have the Switch. And do you remember the time leading up where we were like zooming in on every little thing we could just from that like 2 or 3 minute segment with Jimmy Fallon, trying to figure out if there's anything else in that dock, and then of course the build up to the Switch eventually releasing. It's just impressive stuff to look back on it now to see how far Nintendo's come with this hybrid device, and they keep saying they're halfway through its life. I mean, is this going to be a 10-year system? It could be, even though we saw that NVIDIA leak that appears to show a next-gen system. What if Nintendo just runs with it? What if that's to them like a Game Boy Color? I saw some people mentioning that online, that maybe that's how they'll view this. And yeah, the Switch lineup will just continue for 10, 15 years or so. This could be the largest generation we've ever seen from any one game company. So I have to imagine for Nintendo, it's difficult to move on from the Switch too soon because it keeps selling. And yeah, this is probably going to go down as their most successful gaming system ever, and that includes the DS. But let me know some of your best memories over the last 5 years with this system, and it actually rolls us right into our poll question. Now that the Switch has been out for 5 years, how would you rate the system and games so far? 46% said A, 41% said B, which, I mean, that's pretty good. That's 87% of people said the first 5 years of Switch were above average, 10% said C, and then somehow 1% said D and 2% said F. I don't really know how you give the Switch's first 5 years an F. Even if you just looked at it from like a sales perspective, it's Nintendo's best-selling home console and very well could end up being Nintendo's best-selling system of all time above the DS. And if you look in all of gaming, probably above the PlayStation 2, becoming the best-selling system ever created. I think that at least garners a B, most likely. But like, if you just look at the library of games, the variety, and still games coming up, we're talking about the first 5 years. There very well could be another 2, 3 or so years left for the Switch, with Nintendo's comments about it being halfway through its life. So yes, I think certainly by the time we're all done with the Switch's generation, we look back on it, things will be very easy to make a case for this being Nintendo's best system ever created. That compared to the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, the GameCube, N64, the DS, everything. And I'm now thinking about how we first perceived the Switch when it was shown, especially obviously the articles and the opinions that were going around. It's like, you look back on that now, fast forward 5 years, and I mean, it's hard to argue. Nintendo proved a lot of people wrong. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from JP saying, I'm hoping that with the next gen Switch system, Nintendo takes the opportunity to bring back the best features of the Wii U and 3DS era. Stuff like a play log, system themes, app music, and utility apps seem to have been forgone to preserve the mobile performance of the console. So I'd like to see those things come back. I'm personally hoping for the return of app and shop music. You know, the shop music does come up a lot, and I get it. I mean, previous systems had some pretty good music in the background for those different eShops. The thing I'm hoping for is some more community-driven efforts, like even something like Street Pass, which we took for granted then, and I'm thinking about it, I'm like, that was actually a really fun feature, and I'm seeing Nintendo now start to tie rewards into missions, but what if they do something like the next iteration of Street Pass? They tie in rewards to that based on how many people you pass by, and at that time we had Street Pass, we had Nier with the Vita, and it was just fun ways to interact with people without technically interacting with people, but that's something I would like to see, is Nintendo make a push for some more community-driven efforts with their next platform, or who knows, maybe even an update for this one. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, it really helps out. If not, hit the dislike, leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Was the Steam Deck and some of the different games that it's currently playing. Sure, current games, but what about some of those legacy systems like the original Xbox, the GameCube, and also what about Nintendo Switch now that it's 5 years old? Let me know your thoughts about this system so far and how much further it has to go. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.